Giriraj Maharaj ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jai Gaur Premanande. Карабаджан Прабhu, прочитай, пожалуйста, санскрит. Песня 5, глава 13, текст 15.
So today we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 13, Text 15.
Так, перевод текста.
So the translation of the text. So one more time, Canto 5, Chapter 13.
Продолжение беседы Бхараты Рахуганы.
The continuation of the conversation of Bharata
Текст 15, перевод текста.
and Rahujana.
На свете было и есть немало героев.
So there were and there are many political and social heroes who have
На поприще
conquered
политики и
enemies
служения в
of
обществе
equal power,
и победили не уступавших им в силе
yet
врагов.
due to their ignorance and believing that the land is theirs,
По своему невежеству думают,
they
что
fight
земля,
one
где они
another
родились,
and lay down their lives in battle.
поэтому не сражаются друг
They're
с
not
другом
able
и
to
погибают
take up
в
the
битвах.
spiritual path accepted by those
Такие люди не способны идти духовным
in
путем,
the renounced order.
который избирают те, кто отрекся от мира. Они могут быть великими
Although
народными
they are
кумирами
big
и
heroes
вождями,
and political
но встать на
leaders,
путь
they cannot take to the path of spiritual realization.
Интересный текст.
Interesting text.
Есть аналогичные тексты также в
So
11 песне Бхагаватам.
there are analogical texts in the
12,
Canto 11 and Canto 12 of Srimad Bhagavatam,
где даже перечисляются все самые великие личности за историю планеты.
where the greatest personalities in the whole history of planet are listed
Огромной властью, могуществом,
that had huge
побеждали
power,
врагов.
huge
И
potency.
там описывается, что сейчас никого из них не
And
осталось.
it says there that no one of them is left right now.
Все они претендовали
No
на
one. And all of them,
обладание землей.
they wanted to lord it over the land.
Итак, это могущество основано на
So this potency
ложных отождествлениях,
and power and based on false identifications.
то аханкара, ложное, оно имеет свойство
Hankara, the false ego, it has a propensity to grow,
менять свои масштабы. Просто
to
от того, что
change
я тело,
its
я
size and
ум,
scale.
этот
Just
характер,
because
я
your body have this mind
вычисляю, это
and your
отстаиваю,
personality,
борюсь,
you identify yourself
защищаю.
with it. You fight for that. You protect it.
Также можно шире мыслить.
And the same way,
Скажем,
you
я
can think wider.
также борюсь за свою семью, точно
I
так же,
fight for my
за свое тело.
family the same way, so I'm
Но
doing the
можно
same
еще
thing.
шире посмотреть на
But you can
да,
look even wider.
нацию, представляя определенную нацию,
Like your
бороться
country,
за
your
нее,
nation, and you
точно так
fight
же,
for your
за свою
nation.
семью, за
The
свое
same
тело,
way,
точно так же.
so it's you, your family, and then your
Но
nation, your
великие
country.
люди, они имели великие
But
отождествления.
great people, they had great
Великие
identifications.
цари или мыслители, великие, они
Great
всегда
kings
отождествлялись
and
с мировой
thinkers.
планетой, может быть.
They were probably thinking in terms of the whole planet.
Великие
They were
знания
thinking about the
всей
power, the
земные,
potency to
земные,
lord it over the
мужественного
planet.
человека. Есть на самом деле великие люди, очень.
And of course, there are very great
Но
people.
этим людям не под силу заниматься преданностью.
But even these people, they
Отречься от
cannot
этого
follow this devotional service and take up
отказаться
renounced
от
order of
чувства
life.
собственности.
They cannot
Никто из них не был способен.
renounce this
Несмотря
propensity of having things, of possessing
на
things.
неизмеримое величие.
Regardless they
Есть такие великие люди,
unmeasurable
прошлой эпохи, прошлой
power. And you know, there were such
императоры.
rulers and emperors back in the time.
И Земля, вот сколько она существует,
And planet,
она не была никогда без управления.
no matter how long it has
Цари,
existed,
императоры,
it's always been under the rule of someone. Now we can't even recall all of them. I think it's not even possible because there were too many of them. In one day of Brahma, 14 Manus changed. Just incredible. So Manu doesn't exist at night. He exists just in the course of a daylight. So we're doing some calculations right now. So Manu is the forefather of people, of the human society. So we are all the descendants of Manu. Most of us, we don't even know about our predecessors. So one Manu lives for about
калькуляторе одна цифра, ты помнишь другую цифру.
So even,
so
even the calculator cannot cope with it, cannot do these proper calculations. That you find out how long Manu lives. The calculator says one number, but we know another one. But the real point is that the human society, in general, are under the control always. Manu or someone else, Jayapataki, for example, that is above Manu. Demigods. So this kingdom, it has a very complex structure. And it turns out the whole universe is under control. Every living entity, every person is under control of someone. No living entity is under control. There's no living entity that is not under control. So there's always someone who controls us, who helps us, who leads us, who feeds us, and it concerns every living entity, not just people. So this hierarchy is very difficult, it's very complicated. So Indras are taken over as well. There are some triads. So we know that Brahma is mortal, but Vishnu is not mortal, and he's under control. He cannot create just based on his own imagination. But he can get this knowledge from someone above. So he's the creator of it, but the destroyer is another person, is another personality. Shiva is immortal, and he destroys the universe. Shiva destroys this universe, and then it goes to another dimension without ceasing to exist. Vishnu exists before creation, after the creation. He's the source of Shiva and Brahma and all these energies. He's the main controller. So that's why his ruling, it's piercing through all the creation. But a person cannot renounce his duties. So if a person comes over his duties, like he denies or refuses doing his duties, performing his duties, then he's considered to be a rascal. See, this hierarchy is very strict. So the rulers are supposed to protect their children and every living entity. So Krishna says, I am the king. And the king is supposed to be identified with serving to God. So that's when it's called hierarchy. But when the king identifies himself only with his power, then this is destroying the hierarchy. So here, here's exactly what is described. So let's read this text one more time. There were and there are many political and social heroes who have conquered enemies of equal power. And they fight one another and lay down their lives in battle. Yet, due to their ignorance and believing that the land is theirs, see, these kings, they only live for that. For the land, for the homes. They just cannot get over it. Their power does not spread wider. See, that's why they fight against each other and they lie and they just die in the battlefield. So that's what kind of power they have. It's kind of a heroism, sacrifice of life. So these people are not able to take up the spiritual path accepted by those in the renounced order. Although they're big heroes and political leaders, they cannot take to the path of spiritual realization. So any person can become king if he really wants. There are many kings. We know of many kings in Vedic times. Sometimes a king can just lord it over several villages. But to become a saintly king is almost impossible for anyone. If you identify yourself with this land, with this territory, there's a notion, Raja Rishi from Bhagavad Gita, saintly king. But this is such a rarity, especially in our time, you cannot even imagine it. So ruling your kingdom without identifying yourself with it. But Bhagavad Gita tells us it. So that is the purpose, the skill of not acting, of not doing. So live like you're doing nothing. So you have to stay pure, without identifying yourself with anything else. Not with your position or your relationships. You just perform your duty. So this is called Raja Rishi. So this is succession, disciplic succession. And there are some other kings that are not able to do it properly. They have all the knowledge, they have all the power, some mystical powers just like Ravana. So he could control all the 8 mystical powers, all the Vedic knowledge. But there's one thing that he couldn't do. He was identifying himself. He had many identifications, this false ego. He's been told about it many times. And all other 9 heads were talking to Ravana, give Sita back. Rama is not just king. It's a Vishnu reincarnated in this body. Shastras tell about that. Don't you know Shastras? Everyone knows who Lord Ramachandra is. But Ramana, he couldn't understand it. Because Ravana has this false ego. So he wasn't able. He said that it was just weakness. When you accept God, So you cannot be humble, he said. I cannot humble, it's just weakness. So that's what kind of heroes we had back in time. See, yeah, they perform a lot of heroic actions, and he wasn't afraid of anyone, even of demigods. He even had a fight against Indra, and once he has even lifted Kailash, where Shiva was living. But it's, there's something that is not mentioned of the disturbance. He lifted up Kailash, then Kailash just pressed him down to earth, and that's why Ravana is called Ravana, because he was crying out so badly. He was in pain. But humbleness is something special. In order to get it, you have to love. You have to have love. Unless you don't have love, there will be no humbleness. And Krishna is not playing with love. So the necessities of mind and body, it's not love. So now let's just read this really small purport. Big political leaders might be able to conquer equally powerful political enemies, but unfortunately they cannot subdue their strong senses, the enemies that always accompany them. Not being able to conquer these nearby enemies, they simply try to conquer other enemies, and ultimately they die in the struggle for existence. You see, they win, but it's a temporary victory. As a result, they all die. So what is meant here is their soul just goes down. It falls down and collapses. So and then everyone says about this king, well, he was a real hero, he died heroically. So you see, Ravana, we know, everybody knows about Ravana. Although he was a demonic personality, and he died from the hand of God. So how do they die? They fall down, their soul dies. All these earthly heroes, I keep remembering this example. Then when back in the 80s probably, there was an article in English language in some of the American newspapers, a popular newspaper, about the President Nixon. Where might he... It was about Kennedy. So they were wondering where he was back then, where his possible reincarnation could be. So it was saying that he was probably the chief of some tribe. Some forest tribes, and everyone has read it actually, because you couldn't even prove it. But it turned out that one of the journalists, he turned out to be in that tribe, he was American, and this chief, he came up to him, he started talking English to this reporter. The reporter got really surprised. Like a chief of a tribe could speak English? And said that, you see, he was John Kennedy in his previous life. So he was the president of America, the biggest and richest country of the world. He was equal to an emperor, very influential. But now he's in a tribe of South America. And of course the reporter, he didn't take it seriously. Like, Kennedy, how do you even know Kennedy? But this tribesman, he said, well, I can tell you some details if you want. So he even drew the schematic plan of the White House. How could he do that? He hasn't even been to America. And then this tribesman, he even told the reporter some special details of Kennedy's life. And everything was confirmed because the reporter then double-checked it. So it is called, it's when your soul falls down. So when Ford's grandson came to Prabhupada, so back then, he was a very rare person. He was popular all over the world because he has become rich out of nothing. He was a very wealthy person. He got very famous. And Ford's grandson met Prabhupada. And at the very first meeting, Prabhupada asked him, "Are you the grandson of this very popular person? Famous person?" He said yes. And then Prabhupada said, "Where is Ford right now? Where is your granddad?" So the point is that in this life, you can value yourself as being a very advanced person. But what happens after this, when you die? But to renounce all these earthly values, no one can do it. Everyone and everything is so connected, so much connected, that you cannot just untangle this bundle. All this greediness, all these enemies that we have inside, they just tie us up. So that's in Bhagavatam it says that you can only free yourself by associating with the pure devotee. That is the only way out. And you can get rid of all these enemies of yours. Who can you even envy in this life if everyone dies in this world, this material world? There's no one to envy. So when someone dies, of course, we don't envy it. So the point is that while this person is alive, we barely do we glorify this person. We only glorify him when he's dead already. Some kind of a tradition. We only try to recall the best things of this person when he was alive. You see the way it works? So renunciation of all bad things. Renounce all these bad things and you will see a lot of good things. And eventually, in the very end, you will see Krishna. This is the best thing that you can ever see. The highest, the most elevated one, the purest, the most favorable. Anyway he does, everything is beneficial. Everything is divine. Absolute truth, all the benedictions. But you can only see it having purified yourself. But all the kings, they couldn't see it because they were all attached. They had so many attachments. Just like King Dhritarashtra, he was unable to see Krishna. He had to enter Brahman. in order to see that. See, Krishna even talked to Dhritarashtra personally, bringing up some topics. But still Dhritarashtra couldn't do it. So Dhritarashtra was so much attached to his son, and he was in envy to Pandavas, because he knew that wherever Pandavas were, they've been always prosperous. And Duryodhana, he was so much envy that he couldn't find a place of him. Even when Pandavas were in the forest, Duryodhana were still envious. So Pandavas were very powerful, very potent. And Dhritarashtra, when he started losing his sons at the battlefield of Kurukshetra, so some renunciation started just awakening inside of him. But there was something that he couldn't just tolerate. It was way too difficult for him. So for someone, this renunciation comes very painful. If you don't understand that all his sons are taken by Krishna, this picture will be just terrible. When someone dies in your family, this is a terrible thing. So Dhritarashtra, he has gone through all these sufferings. He has lost 100 sons of his. And he asked Sanjaya, like, Sanjaya, tell me please, you see Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pandavas do the same thing. Brahmins, they used to tell me. And Narayana and Arjuna. So tell me please, why can I not see him as the personality of God? So what's wrong with me? I've heard about it so many times, but still I cannot see it. I don't understand it. And Sanjaya told him very briefly. Remember, Sanjaya was very humble. He's the disciple of Vyasadeva. Just because of his humbleness, he has become the secretary of Dhritarashtra. He wasn't supporting Dhritarashtra, but he was so much humble that he could serve Dhritarashtra. And he's always remained to be a devotee. Look, Dhritarashtra, he's the emperor, he's very powerful, although he's blind, but he's very strong. He's asking a question to Sanjaya as to a spiritual teacher. Because Sanjaya, he had all this very great knowledge. You see, and all these very powerful people, in the end of their lives, they start asking questions to the people inferior to them. And Sanjaya told him, compared to you, so I'm seeing it, if you're asking me, compared to you, I have never done anything good in vain. So your mistake, your error, was your attachment to your oldest son. When Prabhupada comments this thing, he's saying that the whole world is suffering because we have this notion of our people and people that we don't know. So we do good things in vain, that's why we don't see God. And this is all described in Bhagavad Gita. We still divide people into the people that we know and love and we don't love. So they do not take to the path of spiritual realization or become sannyasis. So Prabhupada says that everyone has to take sannyasis in this life. Sometimes he also says that in the Kali age, it might be not so compulsory. But anyway, what Prabhupada means is that you have to renounce your Mature activities. Every man should do this. So you have to take up the path of renunciation. The king, if he, say, has the whole kingdom, at least he has to understand that he has to reach renunciation by the end of his life. So a king should be preparing for that. So if I just fall down, if I renounce my kingdom, just like remember, Ramachandra was sent to forest, and then Ravana said, you see, this is a fallen king, his own people sent him to forest. That's what he thought of Ravana. He couldn't see the spiritual reason and spiritual power behind it. From the material point of view, of course, it was a very trivial story, nothing important, but based on the spiritual point of view, it was such a great story. Ramayana has all this Vedic knowledge, karma and duty, and always good wins over bad. So when a person is attached to something, he loses this attachment. And it's been happening for a long time. Time is just destroying his consciousness. It says in the Bhagavatam that rich men, they lose their money and they think, oh, this is the end of my life. This is it, because I'm identifying myself with this money. So when I lose money, it seems like I've lost myself as well. But here in Bhagavad Gita it says that you have to take to the path of sannyasis, and it means that you have to get this spiritual knowledge. Just to lose something doesn't mean that you're now renounced. It might bring a lot of pain to you, but when you sacrifice it freely, and you don't feel attachment to that, so this is the renunciation. Because we are protected from all the sides. So sannyasis, they've always been considered being behind the kingdom. They didn't belong to any kingdom, to any culture. And it says here again that they do not take to the path of spiritual realization to become sannyasis. Sometimes these big leaders take up the guise of a sannyasi and call themselves Mahatmas. But their only business is conquering their political enemies. Because they spoil their lives with the illusion of this is my land and my family, they cannot progress spiritually and attain liberation from the clutches of Maya. You see, we don't have these examples in the Western life. It's just no one knows in the Western world that a normal person should go through 4 stages of life. No one even knows what it means. So that there are 4 varnas. They don't know how it's all connected. This varnashrama system. So there are ministers and analysts, politicians, they just don't get it. They don't even accept it, they don't understand it. They just see these You see these castes, and that's how they understand this Varnashrama system. But in India there are some examples. Yeah, sometimes these people, they change their clothes into sannyasis clothes and they call themselves Mahatmas. So Prabhupada, he was very respectful of Mahatma Gandhi. He was very supportive of him, of course. But Prabhupada's spiritual master, he told Prabhupada to preach not only in India, but for the whole world. So Mahatma was called a saint person among politicians, because he was a very spiritual person. But he had these definite attachments. He was understanding Bhagavad Gita in his own way. And Prabhupada has even sent him a letter, like several years before Mahatma Gandhi was about to die. And Mahatma Gandhi, he was reading Bhagavad Gita for his entire life. He was called Mahatma by people because people loved him. But matter of fact, he wasn't Mahatma. Even Lenin was called Mahatma in India. But Mahatma means a great soul. So this is someone who is not being identified with his country or nation. But you see, it says here again, their only business is conquering their political enemies. So you could do any things in order to achieve your goals. And a strange thing has happened after Mahatma Gandhi was killed. Remember, he was popular for all the world. So after the death of Mahatma Gandhi, India started having even more troubles, even more repressions. And people understood they had gotten into something else, into something even more serious. But when Prabhupada came to England to preach, so being Hindu, and he was the follower of Gandhi, and now he came to England as a preacher. And he was asked, "What did you bring here? Something new?" So Prabhupada said, "Something that you hadn't taken yet. There's one thing that you had forgotten." So Prabhupada came up with this gift to all those conquerors and repressors. How is that even possible? It's only possible when a person does not identify him with anything else, only with the devotional service. And he says there are devotees of four classes, Americans that didn't like it when he was preaching in America. He was once asked, like, "Swamiji, which class are you in? The first or the fourth?" And Prabhupada said, "No, I'm a person of the 5th class because I'm a servant of everyone." You see, he had no identification, and that's where his power was. So the 1st class people, they listen to me and they agree that they're just rascals. I'm just a representative of a poor and retarded country of India. And they agree to everything that I tell them because they don't identify themselves with anything. Prabhupada was not either Russian, American, or Hindu. When you read his books, you don't even want to identify him with any nation, because he represents the interests of the whole world, of all people on this planet. But is it possible for these heroes that we are reading about, that were identifying themselves with so many different things? They're fighting for something, they give up their lives. They consider themselves to be so great. And eventually they all die. If we didn't die, so why are we so great? There's no greatness. Maybe there will be a street named after our name. It's like the main thing is to die for some righteous thing. So following this set of mind of materialists, you see, you don't have to die because you are immortal, your soul is immortal. So the thing is that when you take up all these sins of materialists and you die for them, if you're a saintly person and you haven't given up your life for anyone, for any living people, then how can you be considered to be a saintly person? So there were many terrible stories back in time. A lot of stories about materialists that were identifying themselves with different things. So the Prophet Muhammad, he wasn't crucified, he was fighting. It was kind of a spiritual war he was in. So already back then, when Muhammad came, the war was being considered a heroism. So if you have conquered someone, then you're considered to be a hero. If you're strong, the law was kind of lifting you up, was elevating you above the others. So the strongest got all that he wanted. And back then there was an ethics of war. So first it was said you have to tolerate, but then Kumar, one of the kshatriyas, he came and said, so why do we have just keep quiet? To keep quiet, I mean, can't we just fight back? We have to revenge. We have this law, can't we just revenge for ourselves? So can we have this war? So this prophet, he entered in a deep meditation. Sometimes he used to meditate for several days and he didn't come up with an answer. And everyone was just waiting. And then the prophet came up with an answer. So everyone gathered. So will there be war? So he gave him like a whole seminar about holy war. Everyone was very happy about it. They took up their weapons and they were fighting. They were leading the war based on these laws. So different times, different prophets, but the sense is the same. You have to get renunciation. humbleness in front of God. You have to pray to God. You have to know who God is. Without this humbleness, you cannot get rid of your greediness and envy, something that is pushing you to commit sins. If you still have all these enemies inside of you, you are a great sinner. So there was an example of a thief that had stolen some gold. So he was taken to Alexander the Great, Macedonian, sorry. Alexander the Great. So this thief, he was taken to this king, and this thief, he was very smart. He said, so what's the reason between you and me? So I'm a small thief when you're a big one. And Alexander said, oh, you're not just a simple thief. You're not a primitive person. You have some wisdom, some intelligence. I think you don't deserve to die. Because he's right. Yes, I'm also a thief, but just a big one, a great one, of a big scale. You see, this thief told Alexander the Great that we are the same. And he started thinking about it. So, renunciation without devotional service does not lead you to perfection. There's a thief that does not accept himself of being a thief, but there are some people that they are thieves. Sannyasis, they accept this notion. So what's renunciation without devotional service? So it's a thief that had stolen a lot of things, and then he gets expelled from the society because there's a law. And when he's just about to be caught, he throws away all the things that he had stolen. He says, no, it's not mine. So this is the real renunciation. Well, of course you can take wherever you want. There will be no punishment. So this is called renunciation. But who is able for that? Who is able to renounce all these things? Only the great people are able to do it. Even if you're able for that, and you have fewer identifications, for example, the richer you are, the more difficult for you to renounce the things. If you're just a homeless person, it's probably easier for you to renounce these things because you don't have much. So people of a high status, of a high level, it's difficult for them to renounce all the material things that they had accumulated in their lives. So these are the few words, commentaries about this text. Remember, so this was the Canto 15 of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 13, text 15. So we have some questions, let's answer them.
Совершенно верно. Называется самсара. Так и есть. Нищие молятся, становятся богатыми в следующей жизни. So the question is about when you pray to God, and you probably in the next life become rich, then you fall down again. Then in the next life you pray again, then you fall down again. This is called samsara. The wheel of samsara. You just have to become a devotee.
So all the poor people, they're very humble because they go through an forced austerity, and thanks to their humbleness, they can elevate themselves, but they might also fall, actually. They can start stealing things. But if they are pious, they call up to God. But if they don't refer to God, if they do not follow this devotional service, they can become thieves. It's about humility again. So how can a poor person go to the spiritual world? If we are talking about spiritual world, not just elevating in the material world, so in order to get to the spiritual world, you have to meet a very pure devotee. So there's another question. So Rajarani Mataji is going to ask a question.
Hare Krishna, Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu, Maharaj, Hare Krishna преданный. Если я правильно поняла, то вы сказали, что
So if I got it correctly, you said that Duryodhana, that he kind of devoted to Sanjaya to some extent. So it's Dhritarashtra, not Duryodhana? Yeah, so this was Dhritarashtra, so he couldn't just get rid of these attachments, even when he was getting these instructions from Sanjaya. So there's a chapter in the Krishna book, it's called Malicious Dhritarashtra, and then even Akrura is instructing Dhritarashtra, explaining him everything. Akrura was sent by Krishna specifically to have this conversation with Dhritarashtra, and Dhritarashtra accepts truthfulness from Akrura. But talking generally about the conclusion that Dhritarashtra has drawn up, he said, I'm also acting by the will of God. So if we leave this word but, we will never accept other authorities of Bhagavad Gita, for example. Yeah, that's a very good formulation. So never leave this but word. Thank you very much. So Dhritarashtra was physically blind, not only physically but also spiritually. And he got his vision back when Vidura came to him. So that's when a pure devotee came after pilgrimage, and Vidura has opened up Dhritarashtra's eyes, and that's when Dhritarashtra took up sannyasi. He has become sannyasi. And there's also an interesting fact about Vidura. Vidura was his minister all his life, but Dhritarashtra has never listened to him. As to politics, Dhritarashtra has no other authority. He was only listening to his son because he was so much attached to him. He couldn't just get over it. Even when Vidura was talking about him, but when Dhritarashtra had lost everything in his life, all these material things, his kingdom, only then did he start listening to Vidura. Just you see, he had to go through all these losses in his life. Only after that he was able to start listening to Vidura. Attachments make a person blind. There's one more interesting thing. Could you please comment on that? So Prabhupada used to say that big politicians, they win over their opponents very often, but unfortunately, they are not able to fight against their own feelings. In other words, their internal enemies, lust, greediness, anger, even though they've conquered some territories and they've accumulated some wealth, all that they have conquered, sooner or later, play a harmful role in their lives. So you have, if you want to become a real victorious person, you have to fight, win your internal enemies. So these righteous kings, they were talking about it, exactly about this thing. So they were surprised by one thing. So we used to go out in a battlefield, we used to fight a lot, but when I came back to the kingdom, to my queen, I just started being kind of a dancing dog, dancing under her flute, to her flute. So they all understood this weakness that they had. Are there any questions? Any more questions? Yes, of course, go ahead. Vrajamani Prabhu? Hare Krishna, please accept my obeisances. So there's a dialogue between Sanjaya and Dhritarashtra. When Sanjaya said, I haven't done any good things in vain. What kind of good things are we talking about? What level of goodness are we talking about? Because devotees, they also preach a lot and they meet different people. So from this point of view, what point of view are we taking here? So there's goodness in different gunas. Remember, in passion, righteousness, or ignorance. You see, there's no point of pouring water into something that has a lot of holes. So that's about people that you start to preach, but if they have these holes, they will not even notice it. So that's why you preach, but in vain. You do some good things, but there's no result. So remember, there was a king, the father of Maharaj Vienna. His father was a very righteous person. His name was Anga. He was Raja Rishi. But his son, no matter how his father was putting into him, was investing good things into him. So his father had just left his son and he took up this renounced path of life. But Dhritarashtra, you see, he wasn't able to do that. He didn't leave his son, he was indulging his son. All his feelings and desires. He even was covering up all the killings that Duryodhana had done, had committed. So you see, it was no use to anyone. All the things that he was doing, it was useless. And there's another question. So there are some devotees there are some devotees in which families, not all are devotees. Like if husband is a devotee, but wife and children are not devotees. And sometimes they do not very pious things. So what are they supposed to do in this case? Exactly what Dhritarashtra started doing in the end of his life. I mean, if you're not a devotee, so what a devotee is supposed to do? Should he just leave his family? If he, does a lot of good things, it's like he's pouring water into something that has holes. A devotee always has devotional service. It's like pouring water into a sieve. So it is said that even if your family is not a family of devotees, but they do not actually prevent you from preaching, that's okay. But if they prevent or interfere your devotional service, then only in this case you have to leave this family. Otherwise, you just continue preaching. So probably there's a general recommendation in Krishna's consciousness. Saving lives is of a priority. But I think we have to just consider every situation individually. Because there might be so many excuses. If a devotee wants to leave his family, he will always find an excuse to do it. He will think of the fact that, okay, my family might be an interference for me to the devotional service, and that's why I have to leave this family. So first we have to figure out how real this situation is. Does this family really interfere my devotional service? So for example, husband is a devotee, a husband is not a devotee, and his wife is a devotee, and he asks his wife to cook some meat for him. Probably in the beginning it's not an obstacle, but then it will become a problem. So what is this wife devotee supposed to do? Probably she'll go back to live together with her parents, live in the family. They may be different scenarios. Yeah, it's just an ordinary scenarios. I think we have a lot of examples like this one. But if we talk about close people, but our relatives, we have to learn how to communicate. So we have to learn how to understand each other. From this point of view, the situation always gets better. Always 90, I would say 98%. Only just in few cases there's nothing to do. So there are very rare events that don't work out when it doesn't work out. But it's a very individual thing. It happens really rarely. If your husband is a meat eater, ask our husband for help. Help you to develop spiritually, and this person will eventually, step by step, will start understanding the value of it. And I'd say 98% it happens, it works out. I've had only one example when one of the devotees, woman devotee, so her husband, he was against her taking up initiation from me, and I gave initiation, but before this I told her to ask a permission from your husband, because he was against. It took her only 10 minutes. So she came back and I gave you the initiation. But there are some rascals that kill the wives, but it doesn't happen very often. I just didn't want to tell about that. So of course we have to escape from such people, we have to leave them behind. So it might happen even even because of meat. So these are rascals, and we're not supposed to serve to such rascals. But usually it all comes down to having habits. It's just a matter of time. A matter of time, understanding, relationships. It all gets better with time. I know one story. There was one Mataji. She was already married, having some children, and she has become a devotee. And her husband, he was a meat eater. He kept eating meat, and in addition, he was working in a sphere connected with violence and meat, like killing animals. So she thanks to her determination, single-mindedness. So they got together. I mean, and this. So the point is that both of them, they had some spiritual potency, spiritual potential. Otherwise, they wouldn't have met. So and then in some time, this person, husband of this devotee, he had left his sinful activity, so he has become a vegetarian, and then eventually a devotee. Probably not to that very high extent, but he has become a very religious person. Yeah, I think this example is great. So there's probably another question that we have.
Харе Кришна. Да, еще хотела вдогонку задать вопрос про Dhritarashtra.
Another question about Dhritarashtra. Can I, please?
Можно, да? Ага. Вот сказали, что пока Dhritarashtra всех не потерял, он не предался.
Dhritarashtra had lost everything. He had become a pure devotee. But how do we follow this devotional service until Krishna takes everything away from us? It is said that we have all directed to bhakti, but how do we do it without losing everything? Can you ask this question one more time, but briefly? Like I need a more clear formulation. So you see, Dhritarashtra, he has lost everything. And only after this, he started listening to Vidura. So how do we escape this fate? So as far as I understand, you are looking at this situation fragmentally. So we have family right now, how do we keep it? But it means that in some time we will lose everything. It's all temporary. So far this fragment is not so important. You cannot see the whole picture just considering this fragment. By the end of your life, you will have understood what path had been prepared for you by Krishna. So the whole life is kind of hidden from us. And you never know what's going to happen in the future. Everything that we need to do is to follow this devotional service, to serve Krishna. It's always beneficial under any circumstances, in every family. And we know it for sure, and we support this knowledge. And we know nothing else, because all the rest, our destiny, our fate, what wives and children we're going to have, we know nothing. So that's why our goal is not just keeping our family, but develop our family, give a spiritual development to our family. And probably in this life, we will not have like good family, maybe we will not, But our descendants, they will know that their grandmother, grandfather was a devotee. So if you just considering this fragment of your personal life, for this time of your life, that might be not insignificant. You just take a look at it as a development of your life. You will take a look at it some years from now, you'll understand that this was all beneficial, it was all done for your good.
Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu. Сегодня у нас 2 дыши, и вам нужно, наверное, прерывать пост. И скольким временем располагаете?
So, how much time do we still have? Well, if there are some important questions, we can continue.
Да, у нас есть еще вопросы, которые присылают нам в бот.
Пожалуйста.
Yeah, there are some questions.
Если важные вопросы, сказал Chaitanya Chandra prabhu, можете зачитать.
If there are some very important ones, we can read them out loud.
От зрителя, от Матаджи. Когда правители несправедливы, какое они наказание получают?
So when the rulers are not fair, what kind of punishment do they get? Yeah, the rulers are in a very risky situation. In Shastras says that 1/6 of karma the rulers take up from the citizens. 1/6 of these sins and 1/6 of the pious life. So that's why it's very important that the rulers are fair rulers, because he is responsible for what he is doing. If the people that he is ruling over are all rascals, that it turns out that the king is also a rascal, because he's responsible for that, because he's taken this 1/6 part. You see, 1/6 of the whole kingdom, of the whole government. But if his subjects are all pious, just imagine how much of benediction he gets. So that's a responsibility of a king. So now our society is completely mixed up. So I'm not going deep into this subtleness. I don't know what every president of a country will get in the end of his life. Don't want to judge. This principle, does it spread to families, some responsible people, husband? Yeah, the presidents of some companies. Well, yeah, it turns out to be a dreadful picture. You see, that's why I didn't want to touch upon this topic. Of course it spreads, but differently. Well, for example, a son has some debts. So when, for example, a father dies still having some debts, that's when he becomes an enemy to his family, because all these debts, they will fall upon his children. So now I believe in different times, now this law, it was refused, it was cancelled. But the point is that, according to the law of karma, if you die and you still have some debts, this will influence your family this way or another. That's how karma works. Now we say that father is not responsible for his underage son. But after the son is full of age, that's when he's responsible for his life. So the question is about great people having ability to call up to God. So the point is that these great people, they lack power to renounce the sense of proprietorship. So usually, like, for example, the war is starting and these great people, they go to a temple and they pray before getting into battle. But this is not about renunciation, that's a different thing. So how is a pure devotee supposed to get through these people, to preach to these people? Well, you have to share a lot of blood, 3 liters of blood. So back in time, Raja Rishis, they used to listen to saintly people. Now I don't know if there are such Raja Rishis living in our world. Usually in most cases, if you become a ruler, you don't listen to anyone else. You know what to do yourself. But back in the time, everyone was listening to saintly people. They accepted these things and they used them. Are there no questions? Yes, there is some more question. One more question. So please accept my humble obeisances. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that when Arjuna is taken Krishna as his spiritual master, it is said that if the person is not pious, he cannot even take up a spiritual master. So what piousness are we talking here about? So you can become Krishna's consciousness, but can you give yourself to your spiritual master fully without being pious? So if you surrender, it's about surrendering to your spiritual master. So well, in this case, it depends on the spiritual master. Spiritual master should accept his future disciple. So no one is willing to give away your life without being paid for that. There's always a risk. If you want to do something amazing in your life, there's always a doubt and risk. What if I am decepted? What if I'm deceived? So it's impossible for you to just become a pure devotee without meeting another pure devotee. So Giridhari Prabhu, another question?
Погромче.
Очень плохо слышно, Григорий.
Please speak louder. Okay, accept my obeisances, please. So I have a question, probably it's not so important, but still I'm very interested in the answer to that. So Prabhupada used to say that one of the people got incarnated as a dog in his next life in Sweden. But then I wanted to ask about the story of this Canadian, about the tribesman that he was incarnated in his life, in his next life. So I wanted to ask about the reporter. Was he devotee? Otherwise, you know, all these reporters, they just make sensations. See, this reporter, he was not a devotee, of course, but he has collected some facts, and he has come up with this with his own conclusions. It's just this reporter, he's checked everything after this tribesman. He came up with the drawing of his office when he was the president in his previous life. But of course, there was not an authoritative information. He's only checked these facts. You know, I wonder if Kennedy was actually working out of his one-sixth portion of piousness or something else. Well, remember, Kennedy was assassinated, so he got purified very much because of being killed.
Поэтому у него как бы карма еще ниже, но неплохо устроился, не в джунглях Амазонки, в какой-то красивой квартире.
Yeah, there was another story that one of the prabhus, he was incarnated into a dog, but in a good country, you know, in a clean and dry place. So you never know what's better for you, to be born in a tribe as a man, or to be born as a dog in a developed country. So there's something else I wanted to add, some clarification. Do all these presidents and rulers have to worry about clarifying themselves in this life? Well, of course, it's not about money. It goes without saying that we're responsible for what we're doing. And when we're responsible for people that we rule over, so as the head of some organization, Jesus Christ, He's still accepting sinful reactions of people. He's still accepting all these things. But since He's prophet, Messiah, He doesn't fall down. He burns all these sins. Just like sun. It burns everything, but it doesn't get contaminated. So the same thing with the great kings in the past. They understood that they had to burn this negative karma. And they took path of renunciation before going back to God. So this is a purificatory process. So we are talking about the presidents of temples, about spiritual people that are responsible for someone else. They have to burn all these problems with the devotional service. So they have to support the pureness. So you have to read Prabhupada's books, chanting mantras, organization of festivals, helping people. So these people, they simultaneously get purified. So probably we should call it a day for today. So thank you very much, everybody. Do not get too much attached to this material existence. It's very dangerous. Especially during the pandemic, it's very important to chant Hare Krishna mantra attentively and wish everyone benediction. Do not be envious. That's how you can develop yourself. We have a great opportunity now to purify all the sins during the epidemic. So thank you very much, everybody. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Карабажна Прабhu, скажите, пожалуйста, есть информация уже, да? Завтра кто будет читать лекцию?
Да, завтра Srimad Bhagavatam.
So tomorrow we're gonna read Srimad Bhagavatam,
Chandra Charan prabhu.
read by Chandra Charan prabhu.